In 2007, the Texas House of Representatives passed an official resolution declaring the small town of Athens, Texas, the original home of the hamburger. Connecticut did not take that well, because the Library of Congress had already credited a tiny lunch counter in New Haven as the birthplace of the burger back in 2000. Meanwhile, the town of Seymour, Wisconsin, calls itself the home of the hamburger, holds a burger festival every summer, and once griddled a patty weighing more than 8,000 pounds to prove its devotion. And a town in New York, a town named Hamburg, insists the truth belongs to them. For states, for origin stories, politicians, festivals, statues, and official resolutions, all fighting over who invented one sandwich. And here is the strangest part, none of them did. Because the story of the hamburger does not start in America at all. It starts 800 years ago on the endless grasslands of Central Asia, with the most feared cavalry the world has ever known. According to a legend told for centuries, the horsemen of the Mongol Empire had a brutal problem. They lived in the saddle, sometimes riding for days without stopping to cook. So, the story goes, they carried scraps of raw meat under their saddles, where hours of riding pounded and softened it until a rider could eat it with one hand at full gallop. No fire, no pause, no mercy. Is that tale true? Historians doubt the details. Some argue the meat under the saddle was there to treat the horse's sores, not to feed the rider. But the legend points out something real. The peoples of the Central Asian steppe genuinely did eat finely minced raw meat. And when Mongol armies swept west into Russia in the 1200s, that habit traveled with them. The Russians even named the dish after those invaders. Minced raw beef, seasoned and eaten uncooked, became known as steak tartare, the steak of the Tatars, the name Europeans used for the horsemen from the east. And from Russian ports, that minced meat tradition sailed west across the Baltic Sea on trading ships into the busiest harbor in northern Europe, a German city called Hamburg. Now, quick detour, because minced meat itself is far older than any of this. A Roman cookbook compiled around 1,700 years ago contains a recipe for a seasoned patty of chopped meat, mixed with bread soaked in wine, formed by hand, and cooked. Read that recipe today, and it is unmistakable. Ancient Rome had a burger patty. No bun, no cheese, no drive-through. But the patty itself has been feeding humans since the age of gladiators. Like cheese, like beer, like wine, the burger was not invented once. It kept being invented, again, wherever people had meat, a blade, and an appetite. And that solves a mystery that has annoyed children and confused tourists for a century. Why is there no ham in a hamburger? Because the name never had anything to do with ham. It has to do with a city. A hamburger is simply something from Hamburg, the same way a frankfurter is from Frankfurt and a wiener is from Vienna. The most American word in fast food is, and always has been, the name of a German port town. All it needed now was a ticket to America. And in the 1800s, millions of tickets were about to be printed. But it was Hamburg that gave the sandwich its name. By the 1700s and 1800s, the city's cooks were famous for a dish of chopped beef, seasoned with onion and spices, pressed into a patty and cooked, served on a plate, with a knife and fork, like a respectable steak. Sailors and merchants across the world came to know it by the city that fed it to them, the Hamburg steak. Between the 1840s and the 1880s, one of the largest migrations in human history carried millions of Germans across the Atlantic to the United States, many of them sailing from the port of Hamburg itself on ships of the Hamburg America shipping line. They landed in New York, Chicago, Cincinnati, and they brought their food with them. American restaurants in German neighborhoods began listing a dish for homesick customers: Hamburg-style steak, chopped beef, seasoned, grilled. By the 1880s, it was appearing on menus across the country, and street vendors were selling it from night carts parked outside factories, feeding shift workers who needed something hot, cheap, and fast. And that is where the plate became a problem. A factory worker on a 15-minute break does not have time for a knife and fork. Somewhere in America, in the 1880s or 1890s, somebody solved it by slapping the Hamburg steak between two pieces of bread. Who was that somebody? This is where our four feuding towns come charging back. Seymour, Wisconsin says it was a 15-year-old named Charlie Negreen in 1885, a fair vendor whose meatballs were not selling because customers could not walk and eat them. so he flattened the meatballs and served them between bread. Hamburg, New York says it was the Minchess brothers. Also in 1885, also at a fair, vendors who ran out of pork sausage and substituted ground beef. Athens, Texas swears it was a cafe owner named Fletcher Davis in the 1880s, whose burger allegedly traveled to the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis. And New Haven, Connecticut points to Louis Lasson in 1900, a lunch wagon owner who, according to the family story, ground up steak trimmings for a customer in a hurry and served them between slices of toast. His tiny restaurant still stands, run by his descendants, still serving burgers on toast, and still refusing to give customers ketchup. Which story is true? Certainly, more than one of them. Just like the first beer and the first cheese, the burger was an accident waiting to happen. The same obvious solution, discovered independently by different people at different fairs and lunch counters, within a few years of each other. What is documented is the moment the sandwich went national. The 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, where 20 million visitors wandered food stalls, and newspaper reporters described the hamburger sandwich as the new sensation of the fairgrounds. America had met its match. The love affair had begun. It would very nearly end in disgust. In 1906, a young writer named Upton Sinclair published a novel called The Jungle, based on weeks he spent undercover inside the meatpacking plants of Chicago. What he described, the filth, the rats, the diseased animals, the things that fell into the grinders and stayed there, horrified the nation. Sales of American meat products collapsed. Congress rushed through the country's first federal food safety laws within months. And no food took the reputational hit harder than ground beef. Because with ground beef, you cannot see what went into it. A steak is a steak. A grind is a mystery. For the next 15 years, the hamburger lived at the bottom of American food culture. Respectable doctors and cookbook authors warned families away from it. Polite society considered it food for people who had no other choice. Sold from carts and all-night lunch wagons, eaten by workers in the dark. One food writer of the era summed up the common wisdom. Eating a hamburger from a cart was about as safe as eating out of a garbage can. The burger was cheap, it was everywhere, and it was despised. It is worth pausing on those lunch wagons because they are the burger's forgotten cradle. In the decades around 1900, horse-drawn wagons fitted with tiny kitchens parked outside factories and newspaper offices after dark, serving the men no restaurant wanted. Night shift workers, dock hands, printers coming off duty at 3 in the morning. The wagons were cramped, greasy, open to anyone with a nickel, and they were the only places in America where the hamburger sandwich was always on the menu. Polite society sneered at them. Cities passed ordinances trying to chase them off the streets, and the burger absorbed their reputation completely. For a generation, hamburgers meant the food of the night, eaten by people the daylight economy ignored. Then the First World War made things worse in a way nobody saw coming. America went to war with Germany, and suddenly the most popular cheap food in the country carried the name of a German city. In a wave of anti-German fever, sauerkraut was rebranded as Liberty Cabbage, Frankfurters became hot dogs for good, and newspapers of the era pushed a new patriotic name for the Hamburg sandwich, the Liberty Sandwich. The burger was now not just dirty, it was suspicious. By 1920, the hamburger's future in America looked like a dead end. What it needed was a savior. What it got was a 5-cent White Castle in Kansas. In 1921, in Wichita, Kansas, a short-order cook named Walt Anderson and a businessman named Billy Ingram opened a burger stand built around one radical idea. If the hamburger's problem was trust, then every single detail of the business would be engineered to scream cleanliness. They called it White Castle, white for purity, castle for strength, and they meant it. Gleaming white porcelain walls, polished stainless steel counters, employees scrubbed, uniformed, and inspected. And most brilliant of all, the griddle was placed in full view, so every customer could stand there and watch their own fresh beef being ground and cooked in front of their eyes. Nothing hidden, no mystery in the grind. It worked beyond anyone's imagination. At 5 cents each, customers bought White Castle's small square burgers by the sack. The company standardized everything. The same building, the same patty, the same taste in every city, effectively inventing the fast food chain decades before anyone used those words. And when lingering doubts about burger safety refused to die, White Castle staged one of the boldest marketing experiments in food history. It funded a university study in which a medical student lived on nothing but White Castle burgers and water for 13 straight weeks. Doctors monitored him. He stayed healthy. The company printed the results, and America surrendered. In the space of a decade, the hamburger had climbed from garbage can food to the clean, modern, all-American meal. The sandwich was saved. If you find this video interesting, hit subscribe. We uncover the hidden history of everyday foods every single week, and you will not want to miss what comes next. Because the burger is about to make a handful of men unimaginably rich. And it starts with a handshake that two brothers would regret for the rest of their lives. And this is where the story takes its darkest turn. In 1948, two brothers named Richard and Maurice McDonald shut down their successful drive-in restaurant in San Bernardino, California, fired their car hops, and reopened with a system nobody had ever seen. They called it the Speedy Service System, a kitchen redesigned like a factory assembly line, a menu cut to almost nothing, burgers in seconds instead of minutes, at half the old price. The brothers had done to the hamburger what Henry Ford did to the automobile. Customers lined up around the block. In 1954, a 52-year-old milkshake machine salesman named Ray Kroc drove out to see why one little burger stand needed 8 of his machines. He watched the line, watched the kitchen, and saw the future. Kroc convinced the brothers to let him franchise their system nationwide. He was relentless in a way the easygoing brothers were not. And in 1961, he bought them out entirely for $2.7 million. But according to the McDonald family, there was one more piece of the deal: a handshake promises of a small royalty on the company's revenues forever. A promise, they say, that was never put on paper and never honored. Depending on whose math you believe, that handshake would eventually have been worth hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The brothers even lost the right to use their own name. When they kept their original restaurant, Kroc's company forced them to rename it. And then, the story goes, opened a brand new McDonald's nearby that helped drive them out of business. The men who invented modern fast food walked away with a fraction of the empire built on their idea. Kroc, for his part, never pretended it was gentle. In his own memoir, he described the fast food business in the language of war: dog devour dogs, rat devour rats. And under his command, the golden arches multiplied across America, then across the planet, at a speed no restaurant in history had ever matched. The hamburger now had an empire. The empire just did not belong to the brothers named McDonald. What followed was open war. Burger King had pioneered its flame-broiled Whopper back in the 1950s, and Wendy's arrived in 1969 swinging with fresh, never-frozen beef. Through the 1970s and 80s, the chains fought on television in what the press called the Burger Wars, climaxing in 1984 when a tiny, gravel-voiced grandmother in a Wendy's commercial peered at a rival's giant bun, found a miniature patty inside, and barked 3 words that instantly entered the American language. "Where's the beef?" The line became a catchphrase, a t-shirt, even a weapon in that year's presidential campaign. Grown men running for the most powerful office on earth were quoting a hamburger commercial at each other on the debate stage. 2 more inventions had quietly joined the party along the way. The cheeseburger, according to the most popular account, was born in the 1920s at a small sandwich stand in Pasadena, California, when a teenage cook experimentally dropped a slice of cheese onto a sizzling patty, and a customer liked it enough to order it again. Other diners across the country later claimed the idea too, because of course they did. This is the hamburger, and nothing about it is allowed to have just one inventor. And then the automobile got involved. As post-war America fell in love with the car, the burger became the official food of the road. Drive-in restaurants with window-side trays, and eventually the drive-through lane, letting Americans buy, carry, and eat an entire hot meal without ever leaving the driver's seat. No food on earth was better suited to a nation on wheels. A sandwich invented so factory workers could eat with one hand turned out to be perfect for a country that ate with one hand on the steering wheel. Meanwhile, the burger went global and adapted like a conqueror. In Japan, it learned to sit on rice buns. In India, where most of the population does not eat beef, the world's biggest burger chain rebuilt its entire menu around chicken and spiced potato patties. A McDonald's with no hamburger in sight, and packed anyway. The burger crossed every border, translated itself into every culture, and became so universal that economists surrendered to it. Since 1986, The Economist magazine has published the Big Mac Index, which compares the price of a Big Mac in dozens of countries to judge whether entire national currencies are overvalued or undervalued. Think about that. Serious economists at serious institutions measure the health of world economies using a sandwich. Today, Americans alone eat an estimated 50 billion burgers a year, 3 per person every single week. The descendants of that despised cart food now outsell every other sandwich on earth. And the Golden Arches serve tens of millions of people a day across more countries than most airlines fly to. But this next part tends to catch people off guard. In 2013, journalists gathered in a London television studio to watch 2 food critics eat a single hamburger. That one patty had cost more than $300,000 to produce, because it had never been part of a cow. It was grown in a laboratory, cell by cell, by a Dutch scientist. And for years, the identity of the mysterious billionaire who paid for it was kept secret. When the funder was finally revealed, it turned out to be one of the founders of Google. The most futuristic food experiment of the century was aimed not at caviar, not at truffles, but at the humble hamburger. A decade later, lab-grown meat had been approved for sale in several countries, and the price of that first burger's technology had fallen from a fortune to the cost of a normal meal. At the other extreme, chefs have turned the working man's sandwich into a luxury flex. A restaurant in the Netherlands sells a €5,000 burger layered with gold leaf, caviar, and rare beef. And the record for the world's largest commercially sold burger belongs to a patty weighing over 1,000 kilograms, which customers could order if they gave the restaurant a few days' notice and brought a forklift's worth of appetite. The 5-cent slider has become a canvas for every ambition the food world has. Step back and look at the road this sandwich has traveled on. A legend of raw meat under the saddles of Mongol horsemen. A dish named in the port of Hamburg. A steamship ticket to New York in the hands of millions of immigrants. A plate food flattened between bread at American county fairs by teenagers and lunch cart cooks who never knew each other existed. It was dragged through the mud by a scandal, renamed by a war, rescued by a White Castle in Kansas, and turned into the largest restaurant empire in human history by a handshake that was never honored. 4 American towns still fight over who invented it. The honest answer is that nobody did, and everybody did. The patty belongs to Rome, and the steppe in Hamburg and Russia. But the burger, the cheap, fast, democratic, available to absolutely everyone burger, that is America's creation. America did not invent the sandwich. America invented what the sandwich became. And this weekend, somewhere near you, in your own backyard, someone will press a patty onto a hot grill without thinking twice about it. 800 years of horsemen, sailors, immigrants, muckrakers, and empire builders, sizzling over the coals. Not bad for a sandwich with no birthplace. If this story surprised you, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us which part shocked you the most. The 4 towns still fighting over the burger, the handshake that cost 2 brothers a fortune, or the Google founder's $300,000 patty. And like this video so more people can find it. We have a lot more hidden food history coming.